Hello everybody, Justin from Stillness in the Storm here. Welcome and thanks for tuning in. Before we get started, please go ahead and like and subscribe if you liked our channel. And we're going to go ahead and speak today about the season of sacrifice, false flags, and some psychology. So this is all going to go in concert with an article that I wrote, and it is entitled "The Secret to the Deep State's False Flag and Mass Social Engineering Agenda. The season of sacrifice begins on March 19th. So this is going to be a video to kind of go along with that. And what I've done is I've boiled down some essential points about the season of sacrifice, how false flags work, how some of the psychology works. This would be a good overview of a lot of these things. So let's go ahead and get right into it here. So first of all, we're going to define some terms, and then I'm going to go over basically what some of these key elements are. And then with these things, you'll have a better idea of what we're talking about here. Okay, so first of all, what is the deep state? Well, the deep state is a loose term referring to a criminal syndicate that is essentially working to maintain control over the human population and human production. So human beings, we produce a lot of things, we're doing a lot of stuff in the world. The deep state is a group that has existed for many thousands of years. That term deep state is somewhat new. And what they effectively do is they use information suppression to control human consciousness itself, and then everything that comes from human consciousness. So if you think about society as more of like a factory or a system of a group of people that can produce things, if you can control what that group thinks and how they value themselves and what they want to do in life, then you can control the group and you can control what they produce. And you can basically use them to harvest energy and resources for your own personal agenda. And that's effectively what the deep state is. Now, from a deeper type of spiritual psychology perspective, the deep state exists because we as a human race, we as a people, we lack the tools to manage our own lives properly. So we lack self-mastery as individuals. We lack the ability to think critically and develop true knowledge. And because we lack that ability, and I'm saying this at a general level, I'm not saying every individual does, but every individual obviously contributes to the whole. So your lack of development as an individual contributes to the lack of development as a human species, and that creates chaos in the world. And because of that, the deep state acts as a controlling or order-making element to control the chaos that's created by society. So from a cultural, spiritual perspective, what the deep state does is it acts as a controlling agent. It acts as to bring order to the chaos of human life. And because they derive their authority by basically controlling the chaos that we create because we're not developed as individuals, they want to ensure that the individual does not develop themselves. So they actually act as an element to control and suppress human consciousness. One of the ways they do that is they suppress thinking. So how does evolution of consciousness actually work? How do we grow as individuals? We grow as individuals by gaining knowledge. We gain wisdom. How do we gain wisdom? We gain wisdom by facing something we don't understand, the unknown. We gain knowledge of it through interacting with it. It's like a dance. And then once we've gained knowledge, then we can use that knowledge to do something we want in the world. So the deep state, or the cabal, or the New World Order, the Illuminati, whatever name you want to give them, their primary method is to suppress human consciousness. They do so through various means. One of them is through fear and control. So they create a lot of fear and anxiety in the world. Then because of that, you generally tend to want to avoid fearful things. That's one of the animalistic instincts, the revulsion or disgust mechanism. You avoid things that you're afraid of. And what tends to happen is people will tell other people to deal with the things that they are themselves afraid of. And that's what this deep state has encouraged people to do. They manufacture a lot of trauma, a lot of hardship, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. They make the world a dark place so that they can nominate themselves as the guardians that keep the horrible darkness of the world away from us. When in reality, it's all a big con game in the sense that they're the ones who are creating the darkness. And what that does is it suppresses our consciousness, it suppresses our desire to gain knowledge and to become our own guardians, you might say. So one of the tools that they use for this purpose is a false flag. So what is a false flag? Well, a false flag is itself what's called deceptive indication and warning in military terms. So it's a tool designed to mislead people in some event or something like that that causes people to believe something that isn't real through the induction of trauma. So you could think about a false flag as very similar to an illusion that's happening inside of a stadium where a whole bunch of people are looking. So the real target of a false flag is your consciousness, your beliefs, your sense of reality, and specifically the way that you understand and generate true knowledge. So one of the things that the false flag is designed to do is destabilize the confidence you have in yourself to navigate reality. The other thing it's designed to do is it's designed to pit two groups against each other. So let's talk about a little bit how this works. Well, from a disturb your sense of reality perspective, it does it in three general phases. There's a preconditioning phase. And in this phase, they introduce a villain that is going to become very threatening later. But right now, in this initial phase, it's somewhat threatening, but not really all that threatening. So a really good example of this is the Islamic terrorist concept or meme or group that was introduced in the 70s and 80s. You know, the Iran-Contras, things like this. These terrorists existed, and their activities was certainly causing problems in the world, but it was a threat that was over there. So for Americans, for people in the West, the threat of terrorism back in the 70s and 80s was something that was somewhat contained and isolated to the Middle East. And the point was to identify the threat, but make you feel like, okay, well, I've taken stock of this threat. Yes, there are Islamic terrorists out there, but they're in the Middle East. And because they're in the Middle East, I don't have to worry so much about them. You know, it's a problem, but it's not threatening me. It's not a clear and present danger. Then what happened is after 30 years, this idea became entrenched. It just became a part of your reality, and you took it for granted. Now what happens is through a catalyzing event, they'll take that initial preconditioning and they'll change some element of it so it becomes more threatening, and as a result, it causes social trauma, it causes individual trauma because now there's something traumatic happening. But it also causes you to doubt yourself. And that's one of the key aspects, the key pillars to almost every false flag, is that they're going to change some aspect of reality that you thought you knew, so it causes you to doubt yourself, and they introduce some level of a threat and danger, so the threat of physical bodily harm. 9/11 is a really good example of this. They took the Islamic terrorist idea that was safe and secure because it was over in Iran and some of these places in the Middle East. Then they brought it home. They brought it to New York City, probably the most iconic symbol of the West. They created this very traumatic, horrific event. Now it's important to understand is that the focus of this traumatic event, again, is not the victims necessarily. So the people that died in 9/11, as tragic as it was, those aren't really the target. The target is us, because we're looking at these things, we're observing these things. And what happened is that this Islamic terrorist threat was then thrust at our feet, and now it is a clear and present danger. So it did two things. Again, it disturbed our sense of reality, and it made us think that our previous appraisals, what we previously concluded as non-threatening, is very threatening. So it makes us doubt ourselves. And it's a threat of physical harm. Literally our livelihood and our sense of peace and our beingness has been threatened by the thought that a catastrophic Islamic terrorist event could happen in the United States and in other places in the Western world. So with these two factors at hand, what's happened psychologically as an individual is that we're very receptive to answers. We want answers, and we want to be protected. We want to be protected by a strong government. And because the threat isn't something that you personally can do something about, then we look to some grand solution. And the solution is the deep state. So this is what we have: preconditioning, that's the phase before. This is the catalyzing event. That's what introduces the fear, and it changes the non-threatening villain into become much more threatening. And that also creates the doubt of your ability to navigate reality. And then once that's in place, then it's the narrative solidification. So now that they disturbed your sense of reality, now you're going to happily accept what the media tells you is the explanation. And the explanation that we were fed is that, yes, there's these horrible Islamic terrorists out there. Now we have to do something about it. We have to have a war on terror to solve this problem. And now before, if they suggested the war on terror, we might not have wanted to participate in it. Be like, listen, guy, yeah, there's terrorists out there, but it's not really a big deal. We don't have to worry about it so much. Now it's on our doorstep, and now we do have to worry about it. And now we'll willingly participate in this event. Now, as individuals, what's interesting is that once we're in this hyper-triggered state, we're not rational. Literally, our neurology shuts down into an irrational state. The neocortex stops working properly. That's the frontal cortex, or the thinking part of the brain. And the more animalistic, limbic, and reptilian centers become active. Once that takes place, we're screaming for answers. We're in an altered state, and we want answers as badly as possible. So we're going to accept the answers that the cabal gives us. We're going to accept their narrative. And because we're doing it from an irrational emotional state, if somebody tries to tell us that these answers aren't what we think they are, like if somebody, a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist, starts to say, well, maybe 9/11 was an inside job, we're going to reject that. We're going to reject it with emotional vitriol, hatred, and defensiveness, because that belief that was offered to us by the deep state that we accepted was used to organize our reality and bring stability to the chaos that was introduced from the catalyzing event. So that's how, as an individual, that's how false flags tend to work. Now, it's important to realize that a false flag doesn't mean that people didn't die or that horrible things didn't happen. In many cases, the vast majority of cases, real people died, real people were hurt and injured, property was damaged, and quote-unquote real bad things happened. Now, in some cases, there can be hoaxed events. There can be crisis actors, but really the point, it's not so much worrying about whether the event was real or staged or not. The point is that they want to introduce this narrative, and they want to cause division. And so what the social aspect of the false flag is designed to do is create division. It's create, divide, and conquer. So you might say there's two key pillars to the deep state's control mechanism. One, they want to disturb your sense of reality and your ability to properly digest reality so you can develop your own competence. So they don't want you to be a free thinker. They don't want you to think for yourself. They don't want you to create your own true knowledge and be your own guide in life. They want you to be incompetent. They want you to be dependent on the cabal, dependent on the media, dependent on experts, so you can't decide what is real. That's critically important. The other pillar is divide and conquer. They want you to fight with other people so that you can't gain unity. They don't want you to share ideas with other people so that in a way that's like tolerant and compassionate, so you can actually develop good unity so that you can work with other people to solve the problems that the cabal introduces. So when they have a false flag event, this creates many different social effects. And this aspect is fairly complicated, so I would ask you to really look at this article that I produced, The Secret of the Deep State False Flag Control Agenda. And I'm going to have a link to this article in the description. So one of the things that they do is they create two groups. You got the group that believes what the deep state tells them, and then you got the group that questions the official story. And because of that, because there's so much emotional charge associated to it, because the people who believe the deep state need that belief to literally calm themselves down, because people need answers when they've been traumatized, these two groups are going to have really polarizing viewpoints. And what tends to happen, and this is where the cabal divide and conquer technique really works well in the awakening community, is that people in the awakening community, because they're so interested in the truth and defending the truth from lies, is they tend to rage against the people who believe the deep state. And now the battle becomes who believes the deep state and who doesn't. And now those people rage against each other. Well, what does that do? Ultimately, it still works in part of the deep state's agenda to control people through divide and conquer. So this is why I would suggest, if you're a warrior of truth, learn how to speak your truth compassionately. Learn how to share ideas without destroying trust in the other person, destroying rapport, destroying fellowship. That's what the cabal wants you to do. So let me just take a look at my notes here. So what is the season of sacrifice? Well, the season of sacrifice is a 40-day period beginning on March 22nd and ending on May 1st. And where I got this information was from a prolific researcher named Mark Passio. He's actually the one who pioneered this information as far as where I came about it. Then I took it, distilled it, studied it, and produced this material. So what you're going to hear is some of my work and some of his work. He pioneered the astrological basis of the season of sacrifice. So from an astrological perspective, the deep state are astrologers. They believe in something called astrotheology, which is the evolution of consciousness can be tracked by studying the precession of the houses of the zodiac across the calendar year. And there's various cycles that happen. So there's the lunar cycle. Every day we're moving through, the moon is moving through at a monthly basis through the zodiac. Every day the sun actually moves through the zodiac. Every year the sun moves through the zodiac. So there's these different cycles, and depending on what's happening in the different year, there's different levels of consciousness that are at work. Particularly, the season of sacrifice is centered around the time period between, like I said, March 22nd and May 1st. This is when the energy of rebirth, of planting seeds that will then grow and can be harvested later in the year can take place. So this is the time when the sun comes out of the grave of the southern hemisphere. If you look at the way that the sun actually moves throughout the calendar year as relation to the earth, in October, in Samhain, on around the 31st, the sun is moving into the southern hemisphere. That's when that track really takes place at the highest level, and that descent is really maximized. It begins on the 21st of September, and it begins its ramp up, its strongest peak at that time on the 31st of October, and then it enters what's called the season of death. That actually begins in the 21st of September, and it moves, and it effectively what's happening is this is the time of deep reflection. This is the time where we've harvested all these fruits from the previous year, and now we're consuming them, and now we're contemplating, and we're being pensive and reflective, and we're thinking about what we want to create for the next year. And on February 2nd, that's Groundhog Day, that's when really the time of self-reflection is reaching a fevered pitch, you might say, and we're starting to think about what we want to plant for the new year in consciousness. So at around March 19th, that's when this energy of planting new seeds in consciousness reaches a fevered pitch, and the sun begins to emerge out of the southern hemisphere, out of the grave of the southern hemisphere on March 19th, reaching its first day on March 22nd, and that's where the season of sacrifice begins. So at this time in history, we see a lot of false flag activity. The Oklahoma City bombing took place on March 19th. The Parkland shooting took place, I believe it was on the 20th of last year. So if you look back in history, there's many false flag events that all seem to happen at around this 40-day period that I mentioned. The peak of that solar new rejuvenating energy happens on May 1st, which is Beltane or Walpurgisnacht. This is a holiday celebrating the solar god, the solar infusion. It's not the strongest time for solar energy, but it is the time of great solar infusion, so that the time when the planting of seeds energy is really the strongest. And again, these false flag activities, they usually tend to be events that will steer collective consciousness in a way that can be used later. So one of the events that happened recently is the New Zealand shooting. The New Zealand shooting had a multi-pronged agenda, I would say. It was specifically designed to create division with respect to the whole Islamic community versus the non-Islamic community, and really create an event that creates a lot of anxiety around Islamophobia, because the alleged shooter was espousing white supremacist views. So he was presenting views that were specifically targeting Islamic peoples because they wanted to highlight this division and divide and conquer agenda that's already been installed a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of race war and tension happening right now. Another thing that they wanted to do is they wanted to highlight the free bastions of discussion on the internet. So it's being used as a method of censoring the internet. They've already made attempts, and I've posted this before on my website, Stillness in the Storm, to paint free bastions of free thought like Reddit, like 4chan, like 8chan, like places like this, Vote, as places of basically deplorable ideas, where if you want to hear about where the white nationalists and the haters and the people who are filled with all this hate speech and the quote-unquote Nazis are, you have to go there and then look, this is where the white nationalist that was responsible for the New Zealand shooting got his ideas. This is one of the things that the media is promoting right now. Again, I just posted an article about this. So that's part of what the concept, this is the seed in consciousness that they're planting, that they're trying to spread throughout the collective consciousness right now, is they want people to buy into the idea that the reason why we have these violent events is because we have these places where people can conspire to do horrible things on the internet, and we need to censor these places, and we need to censor free speech, and we need to confiscate guns to protect the innocents. That's part of what this false flag agenda is about. So generally speaking, we have this season of sacrifices when we have a lot of false flag activity take place. Now, it's important to realize the spiritual purpose for the deep state. The deep state exists, or you might say that the universe, the creator, allows the deep state to exist for several different reasons, which admittedly, this is a fairly complex topic. So I'm going to try to give a very brief overview of it. In order to understand this, we have to understand what the nature of existence is and what our purpose in existence is. And our purpose as individuals and as a collective is to become perfect as the Creator is perfect in its sphere of influence. The way we do that is we seek truth to gain mastery of ourselves. So you could, in a sense, you could think about life like a video game. And in the video game, there's rules. There's an objective. We're supposed to be doing something in the game, right? And if you want to advance in the game, you have to play by the rules. If you learn how to play by the rules, you can advance and you can develop yourself and become better. And in most video games, you get new skills, and then those new skills help you to face challenges in the game that then in turn provide you with greater skill. And that's how the process works. You keep getting better and better, and eventually you're the hero, you defeat the bad guy, and you bring peace to earth and things like this. And a game is a very good analogy for what the purpose of life is. Life is all about you as the individual learning how to become the hero. How do you become the hero? You face the challenges in your own life. You develop spiritual wisdom. You embrace the rules of existence, what we call natural laws or moral laws. And when you learn how to express your desires through these moral laws, through spiritual laws, then you not only get what you want in your own life, but you ensure that you don't overstep other people. So a really simple way to understand this is if you want to express your values through your rights, and by making sure that you also defend the rights of other people. So if you want to have, if you're really hungry, one of the ways to satisfy your desire to and your value for personal equanimity, which is to basically eat food and have the sustenance that comes from eating food, you don't want to steal from other people around you, because then you're going to rob them of their ability and their right to eat food too. So how does the deep state involve in this? Well, the deep state is the antagonist. The deep state is itself, there exists because of our lack of development as a human species, as individuals. So you, in your life, there's certain things that you haven't mastered. Because of your lack of mastery, you create chaos in the world. The deep state acts as a balancing force to control your lack of development. So a really good example of this is criminals. And I'm not saying you're a criminal, but what I'm saying is we all have things we haven't mastered in our own lives that we invariably at different degrees contribute to. Some of us, we've really worked hard to see what we're doing, and we've limited our chaotic contribution as much as possible. Other people are like, they're just wellsprings of chaos. And no fault of them necessarily. In most cases, the reason why people embody, antisocial behavior is because they're disturbed psychologically and things like this. So the point is that if you lack a moral fiber, then what happens is you tend to create a lot of chaos in the world. You're a criminal. You're stealing from other people. You're stealing from corporations or companies. And then you're just leaving destruction in the environment. Maybe you're leaving a lot of pollution, things like this. Well, other people have to clean up your mess. And in a sense, because we lack spiritual mastery, we create a lot of spiritual mess in the universe. And the universe allows the deep states to exist to help clean up that mess. That's not the only reason why. It also allows it because the way that the deep state allows their agenda to come forth is they use what's called a volunteer slavery system. So because we participate in the deep state agenda, our free will actually endorses some of the deep state's activity. And because free will is prime in the universe from a spiritual law, from a jurisprudence perspective, from a philosophy perspective, the spiritual basis for why the deep states exist is because we, of our own free will, give it the authority and power to exist through our participation. So really what the simple answer to all this is, what can we do as people? What can we do to make the world a better place, to stop these false flag attacks, to combat them once they've happened, and solve these grand problems that we face in the world? Well, as a long answer to that question, I'm going to direct you to a presentation I did called Blueprint for a Better World for Understanding AT Contacted Culture. I did that last year at the Contacted Desert event. It is a very comprehensive presentation about a lot of the deeper concepts that underpin what I'm about to tell you. And what I'm sharing with you is that it's very similar to a hero's journey. We're here as heroes. The universe wants us to become the heroes in our own lives and in a worldly sense. We do that through gaining self-mastery, by taking responsibility for facing our problems. In the act of doing so, we gain wisdom and correct knowledge, and then we can use that wisdom and correct knowledge to navigate and deal with the problems in our world. One of those problems is social division. So again, remember, the deep state want to create social chaos. They want to create a lot of divide and conquer, and they want us to lack personal knowledge. They want us to be incompetent. They want us to be codependent on them. They don't want us to be self-mastered. They don't want us to be sovereign. They don't want us to be enlightened. So what do? We become sovereign. We become enlightened. We become self-mastered. We stop feeding into the social divide. We learn how to be tolerant. We learn how to be wise and competent. And essentially what we're doing is, by facing the challenges that the deep state offers, by learning to free ourselves and in turn protect the freedoms of others through morality and natural law and harmonizing with the law, and learning how to be masters of our own consciousness through what I call contracts and the contractual reality, you literally become the antidote to chaos. You become the antidote to the deep state. You learn how to bring freedom to your own life and freedom to other people's, and then you protect the freedoms of other people. That's what a sovereign truly is. A sovereign isn't just into their own freedom and then forget the rest of the world because they're going to go live on an island somewhere. A true sovereign takes on the burdens of the world as their own. They seek to become the hero for themselves and others. They seek to defend the truth, justice, and prosperity, truth, beauty, and goodness in the world, because the truth needs to be defended. There's this idea that the truth somehow just magically defends itself and we as individuals don't have to do that. That's not the case at all. That's what the cabal wants you to think. The reality is that the truth lives in the hearts and minds of everybody, and it's our duty to, if we truly love each other and we truly love ourselves, to defend the truth as much as possible and learn how to live by the truth, incorporate the truth in our lives, and work together to set aside our differences. You know, when we talk about solving these problems and really combating the deep state, it's not talking about creating this perfect unity where we're completely on the same page. No, but we need to get on the same page about the big issues. Do we want clean water? Do we want to leave a world where our children can have freedoms and can think for themselves without oppression? Do we want clean food and clean environment? Do we want to have a fair and just world where everybody has the equal opportunity to live their dream and pursue their happiness in the way that they feel like is best for them, and as long as it doesn't harm other people? You know, if we all value those things, which I think the vast majority of people value those things, then now it's the challenge of working together on the big issues, learning how to be tolerant and communicate with each other in effective and bilateral ways. So it's not my truth and your truth be damned. It's that we are both going to try to work together to solve these problems together. We're going to form what's called mutual subject matter jurisdiction, or share our truths together so that we can figure out what our values are. And then once we've gained that unity, then really it's just magic at that point. Now it's all about making the world a better place. And once we have that fellowship, that's exactly what we can do. So to close all this, I know that life can seem hard. I know that there seems like there's this endless series of problems that almost seem like they have no solution. But that's not the case. The solution is you. You're looking in the mirror right now. Or when you look in the mirror, that's the solution. The solution is the people around us, learning how to work with these people to make this world a better place. And all of the challenges that the universe thrusts at us, that the deep state throws at us, all of them are meant to be solved. That's the whole point. Don't think about these challenges as being insurmountable. Have faith in the fact that the universe was created. It created these challenges to be solved. All that was hidden shall be revealed in time. And together we will make this world a better place. So in love and unity and fellowship with deep gratitude in my heart for the fact that you even take the time to care about this information. I share and I offer this to you. So much love, everybody. I greatly appreciate you taking interest. Again, thank you to my Patreons, and thank you to all the people who support Stillness in the Storm. You can find my work, Stillness in the Storm, at stillnessinthestorm.com. And take this information, share it compassionately and kindly with others. Help others understand what their responsibility and what their duty and what the joy is that comes from trying to make the world a better place and make their lives better through truth and honesty and honor. Much love.